You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Collington. Joining me, as usual, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. You tired? You had 3 home games this week. You spent a lot of time at the Wells Fargo Center.
Well, I didn't. There was one night I didn't make it because of a bunch of
scheduled this week.
So, well, no, and it doesn't make it less busy. It was fully planned to go and just had a day that it didn't work out. So
we all had a very busy week. As we're diving into that, make sure you're following us on our social medias. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where he's at Kevin Durso. Okay,
so underscore everywhere else is what you mean.
Right. I'm sorry, Kevin _ Durso, except for Blue Sky, where he is just at Kevin Durso.
Because apparently there are 2 things they don't do is underscores and videos yet.
I've seen some videos. Videos are coming.
Are they cut? Well, then it's a very slow grind because if you, yes. I think if you try to do it on the fly, it doesn't work. Like
they're iterating over there at Blue Sky, but you can still follow us over there at YWT Podcast. I'm trying to be over there, active over there during games. It's fun. Come hang out. Okay, so we do have 3 Flyers games to talk about this week. They are in the middle of that 5-game homestand that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks here. We are 4 games in.
Mm-hmm.
The Flyers are 2-2. Whatever the Flyers are, right? Whether they're a rebuilding team, whether they're a potential contender, whatever they are, 2-2 on a homestand isn't too bad, especially, on the surface when you look at the teams you lost to, right? You lost to Colorado, you lost to Carolina.
This might be a record for you. Did you hit the title like 2 minutes in?
What's that?
Whatever they are, because that's generally the question that I keep coming away with. You're at that marker. You're at the quarter point of the season at this point. Really, however you look at it, whether it was just go after the round number of 20 or they play Saturday afternoon and you get to 21, like you're right in that pocket, right? Of being a quarter of the way through the 82 games.
Of the way there. Yeah.
And that's exactly the thing is I don't know what direction they want to go with this thing, because they lose certain games that you sit there and you go, well, clearly they're not ready for that level. So they aren't that. But are they borderline playoff team? Are they just completely not? Are they more in the bottom? Where are they? Before that Saturday game started, they were like 2 or 3 points from the bottom of the league standings. Despite the fact that they don't have the worst record, they still are. They're 4 points from the bottom. That doesn't sound like a lot.
Well, and because of the time of year it is, they're also 3 points from the playoff spot.
Exactly. So you are in that middle ground area that and I don't want to make it sound like it's the middle ground area where you're stuck, because so many teams are in there where one losing streak or one winning streak changes the whole complexion of it. That's where I'm coming from with this.
And that second wild card spot is currently held by the Boston Bruins, who just made a coaching change. So I expect them to get that little bit of a new coach bump.
Yeah, that's a week that's all over the map for the coaching carousel.
Holy smokes. And as of this morning, Jim Montgomery to St. Louis, which is wild.
That is a very full circle moment. Number one, because he's back where he started. Ultimately,
did he go from St. Louis to Boston originally?
No, Dallas.
Oh, okay, because that'd be pretty funny.
Because he was in Dallas and they were actually having a really good start with him as coach, and that was when more of his personal issues came up, and that's where the coaching change happened. It had nothing to do with team performance; it was a conduct thing. And then he ultimately landed in Boston, and it took a while. He was an assistant again first, I think, before he ever landed in Boston.
He was on the bench somewhere else for sure.
Yeah, I'll do a quick look.
Yeah, but regardless, this isn't the Jim Montgomery podcast, so we will dive back into the Flyers here in just a second. But yeah, it is wild watching Jim Montgomery get fired, and
for a little while
it wasn't too bad, right? Well, when the team wasn't too bad, right? You're looking at it and going, man, their record's decent. And their roster's not. I don't know if Monty's the problem here. And then, they fired him. So obviously, we'll get the new coach bump.
Actually, so hold on. I'm sorry. He was never the head coach of St. Louis. He was only an assistant.
Oh, okay.
So he jumped from college to Dallas, had a really good start to his NHL coaching career, and then was later released basically because of the conduct thing. And then And then about a year later, what was it? Yeah, like 9 months after he had been let go, roughly. 9-10 months after he been let go, that was when he joined the Blues as an assistant. Was there
Oh,
for 2 seasons, I guess, and then joined Boston.
so
And
this
was
this
on his
almost feels
3rd season.
right. This almost feels like a little bit of a homecoming for Jim Montgomery in St. Louis, and maybe this is where he's coming to wrap it up. Maybe
Well,
on, maybe it's
well,
just another
be
chapter.
well,
But
because let's say now I'll get us back to the Flyers with this
well,
comment.
I was going to
Um,
say we talked about the Flyers being 3 points out of the playoffs. By the way, St. Louis is currently sitting 5 points out of the playoffs, so they definitely need a little bit of a jolt if they're going to
oh,
be
sure.
like because they're trying to be a playoff team, right? They're not in the same position as the Flyers.
Like, but here's perspective for you, okay? Like, this is where I'm going with this. Jim Montgomery gets hired by Boston. That very first year was the record-setting year. They win all those games top the Tampa Bay Lightning record.
65 wins. Yeah.
Right. They just have a crazy, incredible year, right? Jim Montgomery was hired by the Boston Bruins 13 days after the Flyers hired John Tortorella. So it was the same coaching time frame of hiring
In
somebody
window.
and trying to bring some in. If you would have turned around and said within 3 seasons and not very far into year 3,
Montgomery's fired and
Jim
Tortorella's
Montgomery's
not.
gonna have 120 wins and get fired.
Yeah. Yeah, that record is ridiculous. I have never seen a coach get fired with a record like that without some sort
Why?
of
No, but
major postseason stuff. And I mean,
well,
man,
there kind of was major
there kind of
postseason
was some
stuff to
major
a degree
postseason
because
stuff.
they
No,
would
I
have
know.
great regular seasons and then bow out.
Well, and quite frankly, and again, we'll get back to the Flyers, but that first playoff loss after the record season to the Florida Panthers, that one's on Jim Montgomery. You can't keep Allmark in the net. You got to go to Swayman. That series. Anyway.
Right. But there's
Going
a
back to
lot
the
of other
Flyers.
I'm saying there's a lot of other underlying things that were going on there.
Yes.
That's why stuff like that happens. Like here's the thing too. At this point, now Montgomery's was out first. Obviously, now there's been a second coaching firing to even allow this to happen. And that one I felt like was a little more predictable to happen with where St. Louis is.
Well, and
I'm I
the
am
Flyers.
I don't know, and I'm just telling you right now, and this is a torts tie to a degree. I'm kind of like I'm sitting here waiting, feeling like it's only a matter of time before we hear Mike Sullivan's name come up too.
I agree, and Pittsburgh situation feels like
I just keep
everyone.
watching the losses pile up, and I go, and especially the way they're losing, and go, how much longer before they make the coach the first guy?
I think everyone's ice is getting thinner, and it might get real ugly real quick once the ball starts rolling in Pittsburgh. But one more point about Jim Montgomery, by the way, the Flyers will see him on Saturday because the
Yeah.
Flyers do play the St. Louis Blues in one of his first games as their head coach. So we will get a chance to check that out. Let's use that to get us back into the Flyers here because
Right. The 2-2
uh,
homestand, who they've
yeah,
played, all that stuff like that.
we started on Monday night and it was a home game. And for whatever reason, Flyers play 3 Monday night home games this month in a row. It's wild. It's weird. I assume it's Amazon, but regardless, you play the Colorado Avalanche, who their record has
What
been pretty poor this year, but they're starting to get a little bit healthier.
I
John
was
Matushin's
I was
back.
gonna go back to I was going back to your comments. Like, what do you mean by the Amazon thing? Like that's the exclusive?
Well, just that I think there is more of an impetus to put hockey on Monday nights, especially high profile. Flyers get 8,000 national games a year. You put high profile games on Monday nights to draw attention to hockey on Monday night. Like frankly, I think the NHL has done a decent job working with Amazon to try to make Monday night a little bit of a hockey night. Obviously, we all know what dominates Monday nights, especially in the fall, but there are another 40 weeks a year where Monday night's up for grabs. And I
You
think,
know what though? Like I
yeah,
understand what you're saying, but I'm also looking at I'm going, there was a Monday night in October where there was one game on. There was the first Monday of this month only had
I'm
two.
not saying
Like
every
no,
single one, just in
no, no,
general,
no. I'm saying it seems like they're playing more on a Monday when they decide to really put an emphasis, not an emphasis, but it just seems like I don't know. Maybe it's just a building thing this year. I don't know. Like the Flyers control, as far as I know, control the usage of the building
Right, they
anyway.
have
Like
first rights on that, right?
right, like what I'm saying about that is that usually when they would play on Mondays, it would be a road game because other teams are not. sitting here going, well, we don't do this. So they're just on the road and it's building availability. I don't know if that's completely the case here, but because they get first dibs usually, so it's not like it's like they don't get the choice. I guess unless that just has to do with lining up the teams that they're playing, that could come into play. That's about the only other thing I can think of. It's also just really weird. They didn't play a Monday night home game at any point during the previous part of the preseason. You'll see one occasionally, but not before that. They don't play one in December. Then they have two again in January.
To
And
be
then I
fair,
don't
the
know.
Flyers never have many home games in December, right? You have a bunch of stuff going on in the Wells Fargo Center, and they always end up out of
Um,
town for half the month anyway.
they've got about the normal part for the first half of the month. Like they've got 5
Yeah.
of them.
And then the back half, they have 4 games, and they're all on the road.
Well, it's a yes, because everybody knows
Yeah,
it's
it's Disney on Ice.
Disney
Yeah,
on Ice, but that's also a combination of the league getting 3 days off completely. So you factor that in, like, yeah, to be honest with you, when I look at that schedule, and this is looking way further ahead than the 4 we're going to talk about at the end of the show, but that's actually kind of, to me anyway, it's kind of a light post holiday schedule, and it's the same 3 games in California. I get it, but it's like it feels like for 3 games in 4 days in California, it feels like the rest of the stuff around it is really spaced out,
yeah.
and it
Well,
doesn't
and
normally happen that way sometimes.
that's fair. But all right, let's
Usually,
get in.
they get what they got at the start of the year, which was that 4-gamer in Western Canada type stuff, where they really have a bunch piled up, and then they throw some random road game 2 days after they did the California thing or Western Canada thing, and then they come home 2 days after that. They get like 3 or 4 days before they play that offhand game, right? So anyway,
Back to the games that they did play this week. By the way, this game was on NHL Network, so it is some form of premium viewership.
they had a
Um,
couple of those this week.
that's what I'm saying. I listen, as someone who definitely watches all of the games legally and doesn't illegally stream anything. It's been a tough week. It's been a tough week. Um, and so we started on Monday night with Colorado. Team, like I mentioned, has struggled so far in the early season. Has had some serious health issues going back 2.5 years to Gabe Landeskog. He's still not back. And but this game did see, was this Valen Schuster's first game back? It was one of his first games back for sure.
I don't think it was the first, because I feel like I remember watching a game the weekend before that he played
Oh,
in.
okay.
I
It
feel
might have
like
been
I
his second
remember
or
that.
third game back.
Yeah, but
But regardless,
your
they
point.
are starting to get a little bit healthier. They're starting to get a little bit closer to that roster that won the Stanley Cup a year and a half ago. And they're starting to get confident because they're getting guys back. So they're starting to play a little bit more like the Avalanche. What did you see out of them in that game? Obviously, Cale Makar had a had a great game. He's ridiculous anyway.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really just about their guys stepping up when it came time for it. It was an interesting game because they got outplayed for a chunk of it, didn't give up anything, so they were very much involved in it. Like there was no scoring until almost halfway through the game,
Right,
and
and
then
you were getting
McCarr,
outshot 19-12 through two.
and then McCarr essentially could have had a hat trick in the second period, grand scheme of things, and then they did have one goal called back. And
So obviously we're a flyer centric show. You are flyer centric as a person, et cetera, et cetera.
mhm.
But it's still special watching a player like Cale Makar play hockey, isn't it? Like, come on, it's got
Yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
cool to sit in the press box watching him
well, and
be
and
one of
that's
the
the
best
thing.
defensemen in
Well,
the
and I didn't
world.
go. This is the one I didn't make it to, which that's the
Oh
I know.
no!
Well, and that's the disappointment. Well, no, look, it's life gets in the way. I didn't have a choice.
Of course,
So,
of
and
course.
things like that. Not
But
just it's
man,
somehow
I really got to miss Makar and McKinnon, huh?
I hear you. And they only make one trip in. I get it.
Yep.
So, yeah, I get it. And McKinnon had a real, I'm not trying to say he didn't have a good game. Of course he had a good game.
Right.
If you would have turned around though and said the only thing that they did was give up one assist to him in the course of the game, I think you would have taken that every single time.
Yeah, Nathan McKinnon's one of those players that, like, we joke about sports betting, but if you can hit the under 1.5 points on Nathan McKinnon, that's a win for your team.
You know what's interesting about this game though is that I also saw the problem that they're having right now. Maybe Nichushkin solves this because he's back and he's only played 4 games so far. I get it. And this was his second game back, by the way. So he had come back whatever the game they had played the Friday. It was, yeah, there we go. No, I knew it was a random day. I was going to say it was the Sunday before, but that would mean it was a back to back. So I would hope that they wouldn't lose a game or be trailing in a game 3-0 to a team that's fresh off a back to back.
Yeah,
Stranger.
but it's the Flyers, so
I hear you. Once like I said, Nichushkin's going to solve part of this problem. But once you got past, at least in the beginning, once you got past Makar, McKinnon, Rantanen kind of stuff, they didn't really get a lot going with the rest of the guys as much. It was like that was the driving force of their success. Now,
and when you have top 20 players in the world, you don't really need the rest to get going sometimes.
no, but I think it's a big reason why they lost so much in the beginning is that those guys just don't give you as much. Like now, of course, I say this, and they came out on Saturday this week and just absolutely steamrolled the defending Stanley
Florida,
Cup champion.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, and that's one of those things that team's going to get more comfortable as Nichushkin kind of slots back
well,
in and gets up to speed a little bit.
well, and this is the point in that particular game. Nichushkin had a goal and 2 assists. McKinnon only had 1 assist in a game where they scored 7 goals. Makar had 2 assists in a game where they still score 7 goals. Like,
Yeah, they have plenty of depth, but sometimes your top talent just takes care of business, and that's kind of what
I'm
happened
just
against the
pointing out
Flyers.
when you're getting goals later in. I mean, Rantanen had a 4-point game, so I don't want to take that away. But when you're getting 2 from Jonathan Drouin, 1 from Logan O'Connor, 1 from or 2, 1 from Sam Girard, 1 from Oliver Shillington, like there it is. Like there's the full team coming through kind of thing. And they're back in a playoff spot right now, by the way. So it's like
Right. Yeah,
which
they're
which
fully back. They're
which relevant to Flyer conversation because obviously the draft pick situation.
absolutely. Yeah, that pick it
Well,
looks a little more likely that the Flyers are going to end up getting that pick.
because as long as they flirt with no playoff appearance, you have to factor in the
Risky.
protections.
Absolutely.
And where they have protection to push it down the line a year. If they're in the
Absolutely.
playoffs, it's never going to happen.
And then the other story I did want to mention out of Monday night, just because it is kind of the ongoing story with the Philadelphia Flyers roster at this current point in time, is
Yeah.
the goaltending. We had Alexei Kolosov in net for this one. Thought he
We'll get
looked
it.
okay. I thought he looked okay. You know, obviously you were getting hemmed in through the first 20, 30 minutes or so, and he looked really good. Keeping the puck out of the net for the first portion of
Well,
the game, obviously until Cale Makar breaks through.
we're going to get into him a little more later as we go through the course of the
Mm.
week. See, I think that even though he probably, he has a style that like and does some things a little unorthodox in a way. I think he's the entire reason that game is even as close as it is on
I agree.
Monday anyway. I have a totally different feeling about Saturday's game with him.
I agree.
Despite the fact that when we get there, it's going to be a different result. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
absolutely. We're
This.
trying.
This is the game I come away with, and I go, okay, that's what everybody sees in him right now. Like that's when, even though you give up 3, I get it. I get, like you had a good enough game when it came down to it. You're making big saves on Nathan McKinnon coming up the wing, streaking up the wing, like, with all the speed in the world. Made a couple on Makar too, beyond the ones that Makar got. Like, okay. And
And
made one
that's
later on
where
Rantanen that keeps it within, I think either keeps within 1 or keeps it within, whatever. Like you're okay. I see it from you in that game.
and obviously we'll get into it a little bit later with Kolosov, but that's where when you're talking about, liking what you see out of him, even if it wasn't necessarily the result you want, and on
Mhm.
Saturday, kind of the opposite. That's what we're talking about in terms of looking at this long term.
Mhm.
Yes, we are looking at this Flyers team this year because that's the team we're watching, and et cetera, et cetera. But like, it's the processes and the long term. Is this guy a legitimate NHL goalie, or is he just playing well right now? And I think watching the process more than the results is kind of what we're trying to hit on here.
Mhm.
Um, if the Flyers are a tanking team, right? If you're in the James Higgins sweepstakes, if you're
Mhm.
looking to finish bottom 5 in the league, get a top 5 pick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Monday's a great loss for you. Monday is a fantastic loss for you because
Probably the best one of them, yes.
you had a good team come into town. You ended up going down 3 goals to them, but you came right back, right? You have what was it? Tippett and Konechny score within 2.5 minutes to bring you right back to a
Tippett and
3-2 game.
Forster.
Tippett and Forster. I'm sorry.
That was the weird one that
Um,
sat behind, oh my goodness,
right.
whoever was in goal that night for Colorado. Anunin.
Annanen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anunin. Yes.
Yeah, so it was Annanen in that, and it was a weird one. But yeah, so like you go down 3 goals, but Colorado, Casey Middlestat scores 8.5 minutes into the third period.
Yeah. Tail end of a
Two and a
power play.
right. 2 minutes later, you bounce back, and Owen Tippett puts one. It's boom, 3-1 game.
Well, and then the Forster one happened quick
A
too.
minute 45 after that, Tyson Forster, boom, all of a sudden it's a 3-2 game, and
Right.
you got 6.5 minutes left, and you're only down 1 goal.
Well, and this is the thing. So when I did and this is where I'm coming from, like when I did 3 stars for that game, for afterwards for the station, Kolosov was my 2, just for keeping him in the game.
Absolutely. And
And
it should have been probably 5 or 6 nothing, and they wouldn't have had a chance with those 2
right.
goals.
And to be honest, up until Tippett scored to even start the scoring, I don't even know who I had as another another player because they didn't have any offense.
No.
But I made Tippett my number 1 by the end of that because not only did he score a goal, but he looked like he had 3 cracks at the tying goal. Like especially on the stretch, he had that one from the angle that for a second I'm like he's gonna put this in. And
Owen
went a
Tippett
little
wanted 2 points for sure. You could see it. Honestly, he's had a couple moments like that this year. We haven't seen it all the time, blah blah blah, but
well, he's a guy he's a guy later in the week that I don't think played well at all later.
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing, right? Like he had a game like that where for 10 minutes he looks like he's going to take it over completely.
Yep.
And then
that's what we need to see out of him, but we need to see it more consistently and for longer stretches of time. Like Owen Tippett is a very good player. He has a great skill ceiling. He's got great some of the best acceleration in the league. But if you can't put it together for longer than 10 minutes, it's not worth much.
It's not even about that at this point. Like you've committed to that guy already. He's one of the guys you don't have questions about. It's got to start getting going at some point. Like I can understand how you're going to treat, Tyson Forster in his second year. Okay, it's not all completely there yet. He's having some struggles. He's
still finding his legs.
He's still finding some stuff in his game. Maybe despite the fact that he was a 20-goal scorer as a rookie, you can pump the brakes a little bit and sit there and go, well, we don't have to do the long-term contract, or we don't have to go over the top with the cap hit. He'll get his 2 to 3 year deal at $2 million, let's say, because 120 goal season. That's great.
Oh, by the way, have you heard the stuff about the salary cap?
I mean, I thought we talked about that last week about how much it could go up. Like that it was originally going to go to what we said 92.4 was the number they set it at originally, and now they're thinking upwards of 97 to 99.
And I don't think we really talked about it in too much depth last week.
Because I don't think there's anything to go too in depth on.
Well, so there's
unless there was something I missed from the night before or something like that.
So
that's
the CBA is ending after next season, I think it is. And if they readjust for hockey related revenue at that point, it's estimated that the cap's going to be like $112 million. So there's talk about kind of negotiating a little half step this year, going to that 97, 98, so that next year it doesn't jump $30 million.
Well, okay, like in other words, they don't want to see that.
Exactly. So there's talk. So it happened a couple years ago in the NBA in I think 2016, where the NBA salary cap jumped like 20% or some ridiculous number because all the TV money rolled in.
Revenue is that good.
Blah 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 blah. Right. So their salary cap went and it blew up, and that's what allowed the already champion Golden State Warriors to just add max contract Kevin Durant.
Sure.
Which is insane. So, but it kind of ruined the league to the point where the NBA PA and the NBA have negotiated a step program where it can't raise any more than I think it's 5% per year or whatever it is
Because
to
that was
prevent that sort
part
of
of the
thing from happening
negotiation
again.
afterwards was like, okay, so you get that one in under the gun of a CBA, for example, and then so
But the NHL is now facing a similar situation. And there is apparently among some agents, this is via, the Steve Dangle podcast and his little network and,
Mhm.
or his little network of connections.
Right.
Apparently there is some scuttlebutt, which is always a great term when you get to use the word scuttlebutt, about the Stars looking at contract values and going, wait a minute, why is the 305th best player in the NBA making the same as Connor McDavid? That's not
Mhm.
fair. These franchise values are creeping up, creeping up, creeping up. So if the Stars don't want to negotiate like a smoothing deal and they want that big fat gap, the NHL could get very interesting over the next 2 or 3 off seasons.
See, the part though that doesn't factor in yet, though, or not doesn't I shouldn't say factor in yet. What I would wonder is if they would ever negotiate something into a CBA about restructuring contracts.
Well, I
Because
there
what do you no? Because I'm saying, what do you tell? And I'm trying to figure somebody out here who's just recently like, what do you tell David Pastrnak, who just
tough luck,
signed the
brother.
long term? What's that?
Tough luck, brother.
Well,
Why do you why do
that's
you
what
think
I.
Austin Matthews why do you think Austin Matthews signed a 5-year deal?
Well, I get that. You know what I'm saying though.
Yep.
I'm saying how long then, if that's going to be a conversation, then how long before the Players Association is going to put something like that in? Because there are guys who signed within the last 2 years for 8 years.
I don't think so, man. I
I didn't say it was going to happen. I'm saying I bet
right.
you that's part of the discussion though.
I mean, I bet it's part of the
If you're
discussion, but
if you're going to point out that like, hey, in the NBA, the 300th best player makes as much money as the best player in the NHL, then I wouldn't be shocked if there's a line of players who just signed for 8 years and are keeping their cap hit under $10 million a year to make it work for their teams that are going to sit there and say,
their
why is
teams are
this
going to
not
go,
part of
thanks,
but they're going
thanks for the
I'm
great
saying,
deal.
well, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying you're not going to tell me that's not going to be a conversation point. What
Oh,
I
I
think,
guarantee it will.
what I think is a precedent though in the NHL at least for something is they've gone in and done memorandums before on this stuff where they jump in before you get to the end of the actual CBA and
Absolutely.
negotiate bits and pieces of things
They
before
did it
you
during
even get
COVID.
there.
Yeah.
Well, and usually what happens with something like that is not that they do it to negotiate like we're going to alter the CBA. They do it to renew it with the new terms earlier than it would have happened. Is what it is. So I
Right.
wonder if they would even start doing that.
Well, and that's part of the talk is
Because
that
because I
the
think your
CBA
point
doesn't end until next year, so they're kind of amending it by doing it a
because
year early and
because
starting to
I think
bridge
the
the
point
gap.
because I think the point you're trying to make with part of this is okay. I know where part one of this comes from because it was just put out not too long ago about the team values. Okay, you got the list of team
Mhm.
values. A bunch of teams are going up. There's more teams that are over $1 billion now. I think they all are, is what it is. And what is right? They're all over $1 billion, and there's 7 or 8 that are upwards of $3 billion, right, in value. So there's a lot of teams that
Yeah.
are worth a lot of money. That means you're right. That only happens if things are going well financially, for one.
The numbers are going up.
Relevant to the Flyers. What did they do this week? They put a
Oh,
sponsor on
they
the helmet.
yep. That is
Now,
more
why
hockey
does
related
something
revenue.
Well, right. Now, why does something like that happen? Whether you like it or not, it's the new norm of the NHL and all sports for that matter because it's bringing in more money. And that I'm sure helps the value of that to a degree. And then factor in as much as there's not an all-star game this year, thing kind of like that. You're going to tell me Four Nations isn't going to help boost revenues?
I should hope so.
I mean,
Yeah,
well, I'm saying like
listen,
you can't tell
they
me
do
you can't tell me that they can't factor in this early. I know it's not until February, but you can't tell me they
thousands
can't
of jersey
factor in.
sales,
Well, I don't know if the jerseys are.
tickets.
Tickets was where I was going.
Well, I
You're already
guarantee
planning,
if the jerseys aren't available yet, I guarantee they're going to.
and they
How many
will.
people have Team North America jerseys?
Well, oh sure, and that's what I was getting, and I agree with you on that.
Yep.
The merch from that is going to do well.
Well, and especially because this is the tournament. This is the international tournament where you're allowed to make money on selling jerseys if you're the NHL, right? You don't make money selling Olympic jerseys.
Right, because it's handled
This is
totally differently.
this
And
is your chance.
and you don't make, and obviously you don't make money from anything else that goes on. No world championships, no world juniors where like a jersey becomes available through something else. You know,
So this is the NHL will absolutely be selling these jerseys because, like I said, it's your one chance to sell the Trey
well,
Kroner
no, yeah,
jersey,
no
which
kidding.
is
If
the
they
most
sell
beautiful
all-star,
jersey in the world, objectively speaking.
if they sell all-star jerseys, then sure, like, of course they're gonna sell these. This is like their World Cup of hockey again, and they sold those,
Exactly.
like you said. So exactly. But I'm saying that's at least the first three. I'm sure there's more elsewhere with all of this, but those are the three things offhand. And I get it, right? Like, and the interesting part of what I was bringing up with at least the first 2 points of it is the team values are the team values because of what they do individually too. Like it's not just as simple as, well, the whole league's making money because of a national TV deal and this and that. So everybody, like, yes, everybody goes up, but there are teams that are worth more and will have a bigger jump without doing, actually with doing less because of their history. Like when the New York Rangers value goes up, it's less about what they've done in the last year and more about, well, you're the New York freaking Rangers. That's why
Right.
your value goes up.
And also, by the way, you play in Madison
Right, you
Square
play in the most famous arena
Garden.
in the United States,
Literally, it's
possibly in
literally
the
called
world.
the world's most famous
Right,
arena. Come on. And it's your
right.
home base. Like we talked about the Flyers having first right of refusal for Wells Fargo. You have first right of refusal for Madison Square Garden, brother.
Pretty much. Um,
That's
that's all I'm
insane.
saying. But that's what I'm saying is when you take the team values, you take the like I said, you take the other part of the equation where teams are sponsoring more, pretty much every team in the league's got a jersey sponsor. Now pretty much every team in the league. I think what I see, the Flyers were the one of two that were left that didn't have a helmet sponsor. Now there's would be one, I guess.
Well, and by the way, I brought all this up because you mentioned Noah Cates and a potential 2 or 3 year kind of
And
deal.
that was Forster I mentioned for
Oh,
that, but
I'm sorry. It was Forster. You're right. I think Cates is in a similar spot, frankly, but like
well,
we'll see.
Cates is already there, I think is actually the point.
Okay.
Because Cates has
Um,
already had to re-sign. That's what I'm saying. Like this is going to be Forster's first contract out
but
of
what
any.
I'm saying is I think you're gonna see a lot of players sign 2 and 3 year deals this offseason and next offseason because you're going to see guys betting on that cap going up big time. And if a Noah Cates bridge deal, or I'm sorry, if a Tyson Forrester bridge deal is 2 years at $3 million now, at the end of that deal, if he if he touches 30 at all or puts up 20 in both of those seasons or whatever it is,
Mhm. Oh,
all
he's
of a
making
sudden
$7 million.
probably more than that if the cap's 115.
Or I'm not trying
And
to. I'm not trying to
yeah,
guesstimate 4 years from now, but I get your
but you
point.
know what I'm saying is that it's going way up, and instead of 7, 6, he might end up being kind of an 8, 9 because the
Well,
cap
right. What
is so
you're
much higher because it's
right,
all
right,
about
right.
percentage of cap.
Because what you're doing is you're going to play the card of, and I'll do it this way for you
Okay.
to level with you.
Okay.
You're now expecting him to make 8 to 10% of your salary cap doing that,
And I
right?
think if this cap does jump huge over the next couple of years, I think we will start to hear a lot more about percentage of cap. Uh,
Right,
because
because
that's the number, right? It doesn't really matter what the actual dollars and cents are. How much cap space are you taking up?
right, and like, and listen, we're locked into the season as it is, so it's a little early to play
Of
the let's
course.
look at the salary cap kind of stuff and do all of that. Beyond next season, they don't have a lot of committed contracts. Grand
And
scheme of things,
who are
it
the ones they
feels
have committed, right? You
well,
have Sanheim, you have Tippett, you have Couturier, obviously he's not going anywhere. If we're saying what after you said after next season, so after the
right after
25-26
25,
season,
26, you have at this point. This is just by my
yeah,
count.
how many players is it?
You have 6 forwards and technically 4 defensemen with contracts committed beyond
Ryan
name.
Ellis doesn't count.
No, but well, no, but your cap increases will make that a little more bearable until it's over. I'll give you
That's
that part. Well, okay, and well, let's play the technically card a little differently because also, by the way, that's it. You have no goalies beyond next season already. So,
yeah, but you didn't have any goalies beyond next season anyway, right? We're still trying to figure all that out.
I'd say I think that as long as Harrison continues to be consistent, they will continue to do that as long as they can until they have
Yeah,
somebody
right.
else. But
Well, by then Zavragin will be over, so it'll be okay.
no, he won't. Not in
I
two
know, I
years.
know, I know.
Not in 2 years.
Okay.
Um, here's where I'll like. So this is where I'm trying to go. Like, okay, you don't want to count Ryan Ellis. That's fine. I will then give you two defensemen that I feel pretty safe saying will be here 2 seasons from now.
Oh,
Sanheim's one of
Anaheim.
them, as you mentioned, and Nick Seeler had just signed, and he's making less than $3 million anyway, which is going to sound great if the cap goes up that much in 2 years. That
That's gonna be what third pairing defensemen make, right? Right.
Oh,
That's
sure, absolutely.
absolutely.
The question mark is that would technically be the last year of Rasmus Ristolainen. And that is definitely a big wait and see game because that's something that could be revisited as soon as this year.
Well, and I wonder, like I talked about it from kind of the player's perspective and trying to cash in once the salary cap goes up and blah blah blah. What if Danny Briere doesn't want to fill a roster beyond 25, 26? What if he wants to have money and have some availability and
Do you
maybe
want me?
there's a free agent class he's looking
Well,
at. Maybe
do you,
there's,
do you want me to tell you what will tell me that answer fully?
okay.
Pretty much as long as he is not signing a contract in season, short of it being a guy that we can all figure out is legitimately part of it. Like I don't right now, if he were to sign one of the forwards that's up for a new contract right now, hold for like I guess Tyson Forster because of his age and all stuff like
Is
that.
this
Like,
bridge deal is a possibility?
well, generally speaking, I'm saying because
Like,
like to me, I don't have enough information from this start, like a quarter of the season, which is again this where we kind of started with this conversation about the homestand. I don't have enough information on Morgan Frost yet to sit there and say what's the next contract look like. I'm not even going there right now. I don't.
I would argue that I have seen enough from Morgan Frost, and the next contract starts with a different team.
Well, fair, but that's what I'm saying. If you're making the commitment now and not sitting here saying, well, if by what if he has a really good second half and I see it finally, and you can build off of the fact that once he was sat down for a little, it got better. You know what I mean? Like if you can figure that out and he can just figure out how to do it for a whole year instead of the half year thing, then maybe they do another short term deal. Maybe. But right, like as of right now, I'm with you. Right now, I don't know if he's got a future. So because of that, I wouldn't want to sign him. I'll give you a guy who doesn't do necessarily anything wrong or doesn't do anything where like Noah Cates is up for a contract. But I don't know right now that I want to be sitting there going, let's sign Noah Cates for 3 years at whatever number it's gonna be. He's already making over 2.5 mil. He's making 267. Do I want to go and commit 4 mil for 3 years to Noah Cates right now? I don't know.
Well, and I think after you've signed your bridge deal, I think at this point for him specifically, let's sign another 2 or 3 year deal, man. Like you did your ELC, you did your bridge. Are you signing a big contract? Are you here for good, or and maybe not big as a number, but I'm talking 4 or 5 years. Like give me a little bit of term. Give me your like the prime of your career. Let's actually. Are you a flyer, or are we moving on?
Like, okay, but here's a comparison because I laughed about this when I saw this earlier in the week because the Flyers never do deals like this. Never, because they end up having to pay guys who don't live up to this or guys who don't play like this and have the role that this guy does, and then are able to give him a deal like this. So I think it was Brett Howden signed an extension with Vegas this week. I saw the number come through and thought it was a joke because you never see contracts like this 5 by like 2.5. And I'm sitting
And
there going,
that is great work out of
and I'm
Vegas.
sitting there going, I guess when you're Vegas, now one, I know the situation with the way the money works in different places. I get that part of it for one. But also, I'm sitting here going, that's a guy who understands I'm never going to be more than top 9 at best. I'm never going to be Mark Stone. I'm never going to be Jack Eichel. I'm never going to be Ivan Barbashev. I'm never going to be any of those guys that play up there. But I can be the best fourth line center or winger in the league and make $2.5 million, be perfectly within my number, and I can lock in for 5 years. The Flyers never sign contracts unless you're giving Nick Delorier 4 years at 1.75 mil. That's about as far as it goes. And
You
Delorier doesn't
Rasmus
even.
Ristolainen 5x5. No, I'm joking. I know that's different. I know.
And to be honest, that actually aged decently from a
It,
money standpoint later on. You don't
I
like that you walk
refuse to give
into.
Chuck Fletcher credit for that. It was awful at the time,
Like
but
I
yes.
think a team that wants to make him a borderline second, third pairing guy that's a contender that wants the skill set would take it. in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to be easy to be taken. Like
Ristolainen's contract is up after next year.
2 years. He's got 3 left. Or
Okay.
that's the problem.
If in the offseason they decided they were comfortable with retaining for 2 years, and I don't necessarily know if they were, you can get that number down to a point where you can get real quality assets for Rasmus Ristolainen at this point, if you're so inclined.
But where I was going with the conversation about like the next year thing and whatever is like, I could understand if they wanted to go out and it's, remember the big kind of re-signing, doing the extensions early spree that Briere was on in like
Yeah.
January last year.
Yeah.
If you came out in January of next year during the season, and that was when you came out with Cam York's got an extension, I would totally understand it. Like, I can understand how you have the information that you need to say, let's do this now and get ahead of it before we're in the offseason.
Cam York has
I'm
a
not,
significant enough sample size.
I am not there with any of the other forwards, though.
Okay.
And that's the difference. If so, to me, your commitment to down the line and let's see where the cap goes towards forget about the guys we could be keeping. Where, like, I'm waiting out the guys we can be subtracting again.
Well, and
that's why and that's why when I go to that forward group, you want the 6 guys who have contracts beyond next season. Yep, Couturier's probably not going anywhere. Tippett's not going anywhere. Konechny's not going anywhere. And then
LC isn't going anywhere.
Michkov's the fourth, sure.
Yeah.
You just gave Garnet Hathaway a deal where Garnet Hathaway by that point will be making perfect fourth line money, and he is not the same kind of fourth liner that Delorier is at this point. He's making
he has hockey skill.
No, guess what? There's the Brett Howden contract. There's the guy making $2 to $3 million who plays a role. Get it. Totally get it. Then there's one more name that's on there that has a contract beyond 2 seasons from now that I go, I have no idea what's going to happen with this. It's Joel Farabee.
That's what I'm saying.
Everybody else is next year and it's over or it's up, right? So we're already talking about Frost and Cates, right? Forster is this year technically too, but I think they're going to do something with that, right? Then Delorier's contract is off the books 2 years from now. Lawton's contract is up. Paling's contract is up. By that, now that here's an interesting one for you because this is something that they could do with Morgan Frost, at least, and I'm going to check. They can do this with Cates as well if they really wanted to. You could do the same thing and run it back next year with both of those guys arbitration eligible. Take it to arbitration, do the 1-year deal kind of thing, potentially, whatever it may be, and then they're UFAs. And then you enter that conversation.
Yeah, and then you start to have the do we trade them? Do we lose them for nothing? Do we re-sign them?
Well, that's why I think those guys are interesting this trade deadline because what you can trade this offseason is the rights to arbitration for 1 more year where teams have a little more control that feels a little more significant. I get that. Yeah, if you do that next year and they're UFAs, totally different animal. Now it's rentals.
If you're looking at it or if you know off the top of your head, at that 25-26 off-season point that we keep kind of talking about here, yes. How much time will Joel Farabee have left on his contract? Will it be 1 year or 2?
2. He's up after 27-28.
So now, here's how I look at that. If you're trading Joel Farabee, right? If the Flyers make Joel Farabee available, and I'm another team in this league, I'm looking at player who very clearly has talent, who very clearly has skill, who for one reason or another hasn't been able to kind of put it together sustainably at the NHL level, or maybe it's not working with this coach, or something has been a little bit off with Joel Farabee for the last couple of years. So you look at it as a reclamation project, but if you're also concerned about this salary cap situation and the salary cap's going to go way up, it's a reclamation project with a little bit of cost certainty, right? Because if, Joel Farabee puts it together and blah, 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 goes to a new team, plays well for 3 or 4 years and hits free agency in 27-28, he has the skill set to be an $8, $9, $10 million guy, especially if the salary cap has gone up. Obviously, he is not that now. I am not saying he is that now, but he has the skill and the potential to theoretically be that in a team that puts it together. So that cost certainty can, if you sell it right, if you're Danny Briere, can influence his trade value in a positive way.
It could. I think it's a little early to even be talking about some of this, to be honest, because
Well, and I think we'll have a much clearer picture of
well,
it
I'm trying to
by the
shift this
trade
back to the
deadline.
week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We'll have a much clearer picture of it by the deadline, just because I think at that point they'll know whether the cap's going up this year or not, like
Well,
big
but in
time this
well,
year.
but in fairness, like the reason you're even having a conversation is because right now, like you also, and that's exactly a fair point. Is once you know what the cap situation is going to be, then you can make decisions in a totally different way, all around. Because right now you're sitting in a situation where it's like, well, if it's still the same, then how are teams going to react to something like that? You know, like how would that change? Like
Yeah, the
5 million, 5 million's different when the cap's going up over 100 million eventually versus, oh, it's staying, it's going to be only 94 million. You know, what, what if they
and
hit you with that, you know?
right, and we will get back to the current team here in a second. But I did just want to say, I think over the next 2 years, if this salary cap thing does happen, whether it happens over one off season or two or three, you're gonna see a real test of your general manager's skill. You're gonna see how good your general
You
manager
already
really
are as far as
is.
I'm concerned. Like I get,
I,
and
I
I
agree.
like there's mainly because there's so much work to do because if you as you're watching the course of this week, if you don't see how this team needs center depth in the worst way possible,
Oof.
that like they have next to nobody, it feels like
Well,
Sean
especially when Morgan Frost can't get into the lineup.
Well,
Like,
exactly, but, like, Sean Couturier gives you good games on occasion, and like, I don't think Couturier's ever really played a poor defensive game this season to a degree. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't have
agreed.
his moments, I'm not saying he doesn't make mistakes, I just don't think that, like, the overall body of work, he's giving you solid defensive play and a very inconsistent offensive play, as has kind of been the case over his career for the last little while.
Yeah. I I love Sean Couturier. If you've been listening to this show, you know I love Sean Couturier. I
Right.
was the king of the Couturier for Selke committee the year he won it. But at this point in time, maybe based on his injuries, maybe based on et cetera, I think at this point in his career, he would be best served as a 2 or 3 C. And the fact that he has to be your 1C most nights it's
Yeah, but there's also a
it's
way,
just
like
not where he's at in his
yeah, but
career.
there's a way where that still works on occasion because of who he's able to still be played with. Like
Absolutely.
when you throw him out there with Konechny, and if you do take the chance of putting Michkov up there, let's say, or you know, it depends. Like there are games where Tippett looks perfectly suitable for it, and there's games where Tippett doesn't look great at all in that
And
spot. He's been very inconsistent to start the year.
yeah.
There's and that's the hard part, right? Because there's a hard part of this where it's some nights the wingers don't look very good, or the wingers aren't scoring as much as they could, or like you think they should, and some of it has everything to do with, well, they have no center depth, so how do they get anywhere close to getting opportunities?
You can't win faceoffs if you can't drive play through the center of the ice.
But there is also an element to me where I sit there and I go, there are nights where it's just those guys aren't good enough either. Like they
Fair
have that
enough.
moment too, you know, like like I don't have to we don't have to spend 20 minutes on the Carolina game this week to
Mhm.
just go into look at the third period.
Yeah.
The third period of that game, they barely possessed the puck.
And no, yeah, it was bad. And
They got
like when
massively outplayed in that third
when
period.
when Sebastian Aho scores a minute into the period to make it 2-1, something happened and the air went out of them. Like yeah,
Well,
they just didn't. There was no fight back, and maybe because you fought back so hard on Monday, you ended up having to fight back again on Saturday. It,
they
maybe
don't.
it's just the
They
nature of you
obviously
can't
they
fight
don't.
back every night.
I was just say they don't know that on Saturday when they're
Right, of
playing
course.
Wednesday. But where I was going to go with that is that so there was some part of it that it was you really needed a save there on that
Mhm.
second one. Now I'm watching it. That I did go to this one, obviously. Now I'm watching it, and not 2 seconds before the puck's in the net on that second goal that gives Carolina the lead for good, they turn it over, and I turn around, and the first words out of my mouth were "wrong guy to turn it over to." So I know you need a save there, but in my head I'm going, nope, don't like
And,
that part
and
because you're giving. Not only did you give it away, you gave it away to Sebastian Aho.
And worth mentioning, because I did mention the goalie on Monday's game, this was Fedotov against Carolina. He honestly, other than that little stretch in the third period, he looked fine. He looked fine. He did. Through the first two periods, he looked pretty solid. He made some good saves. He kept you in the
Right.
game. He kept it a 1-1 game, frankly, because that game probably shouldn't have been 1-1 after two. And then in the third period, it kind of just falls apart for a few minutes for
But
him,
there was an
and
element,
I
there
feel
was an
bad.
element where like they played a good first period, but were trailing despite having an 11-10 lead in shots. Okay, second period, you score, ironically, to start the period, your first shot of the period, and then you ended up with 3 shots for the rest of the period, while Carolina took 10. All right, there's a bit of a push. 20-15 still doesn't sound that bad.
Not too lopsided.
Not yet. And then at one point in time, you were able to look up and see, I believe, 15-2 at one point. And by that point, the score was out of reach anyway. But that's just like I looked and like later on when, when Saturday's game rolled around, they ended up with, well, I don't know what the deal was, because every time I looked up, they kept changing the shot total. Like they kept giving them shots, then pulling them off the board. But at one point in
They
time, they
mentioned
got
that on the broadcast too.
well, because the broadcast is reflective of what's up
Yeah,
there. That's what
yeah.
it is.
Go on.
And at one point in time, they had gotten to the first TV timeout with technically 6. They pulled it back to 5 later, and then it was just a gong show from there. But
Someone was learning how to count shots in the Wells Fargo
no,
Center
I
on
think
Saturday.
what they keep doing is they review them later and
Oh, it
determine,
hit
oh,
something. It's a
this
goal.
didn't
It's
hit
a shot.
right, it didn't hit anything, or either that or it's the old habit where now they're counting less shots that are intended to go wide that the goalie plays anyway, kind of
Okay,
thing,
fair enough.
or they're taking away that, well, we're not going to give you the dumping from center ice as a shot anymore, kind of thing. And somebody clicks it right away because it's like, oh, we've been doing that for years, give the goalie a
And it
little
just gets
whatever.
adjusted later.
Right. Like it's like someone's watching, it's almost like someone's watching replay.
Right.
And
Like,
at
why are
the
we
TV,
auditing shot counts? Okay, anyway.
but anyway, but what I pointed out really quick was, it's like, oh, well, they're having a way better start this time because now they're up to 6 shots. They only had 7 over the last, whatever that turned out to be, 38 minutes of the game against Carolina, right? Like totally changes the way that you feel about that.
All right. We got one more game to talk about here.
Yeah, I know you want to get to this one more because
Are you
this is
ready
the
to talk about
positive.
are you ready to talk about the best player from the 2023 NHL draft?
I mean, I guess this morning he sure is.
So on Saturday, the Philadelphia Flyers played Chicago. Obviously, this is the Michkov versus Bedard showdown. It was a 1 p.m. puck drop Eastern time, which was just lovely. Just rip it right in the middle of the day. The game was all by itself on the schedule. It was the only afternoon game. They were really the highlight and the focus. Another national game, like I said, definitely not streamed illegally in this household at all. And man, I love Matvei Michkov, and I'm going to say that every show, hopefully for the next 20 years. But I, I, I keep trying to find words to describe this kid and what it feels like to watch him as a Flyers fan. It feels like a well of cool spring water in the desert. It is so nice watching a hockey game and the guy on your team is the best player on the ice. Maybe not all the time, maybe not the best player, full stop. But at this current moment in time, he is the best player on the ice. And that was Matvei Michkov in the third period and overtime of this game. He, what do you think?
I don't know if I would go so far as the third period.
Okay.
Like, if I'm being honest with you, when I went back and looked and I made him, like, again, spoiler alert, we haven't put this out completely. Well, I shouldn't say that. Actually, I've been sending over graphics to the station for the 3 stars, and they're up pretty much immediately after I send it. So it is out there. It just wasn't right on the air, I guess. And I haven't shared it personally yet. I do that the day after usually. He was my first star from the game because he
That's
scored.
crazy.
Hold on, because he scored the game-winning goal.
Yeah.
I didn't realize until after the game was over because it's an obvious first star, and he was, he was the first star of the game
It was the
there too.
story. It was, yeah.
Right. That was his only shot on goal of the game, and his box score literally had nothing else in it.
Yeah, but what's the
You know what I
shooting
mean?
percentage?
Well, I get it. I get it.
I'm
I
joking. I know.
understand. I'm saying there are nights where I can pick him and be like, "Oh, you did like he was a no-brainer first star for the San Jose game when he came back into the lineup. You score a goal, you have an assist, you score in the shootout, and then there's all these other numbers that go with it, right? He had one shot on goal, and it was the overtime game winner, and that was it.
When you're
And
that good, you only need one.
it doesn't mean that you have a poor game. He had moments in the game. Some of his moments, by the way, I don't know if you saw this one floating around socials, but some of his moments didn't have anything to do with offense. He had a back check in the game that people were impressed with. You know what I mean? Like
The national broadcast crew, Kevin Weeks in particular, was very impressed with the physicality he showed after the whistle. In the third period, little pushing and shoving by the net. He, stands
yeah,
his
you're
ground,
talking
holds
about
his.
I know exactly which one you're talking about because he comes in and
If
has like this
man,
look on his face like, no.
if you haven't watched it, if you can go find the call, it's pretty funny because, like, respectfully to Kevin Weeks, you can tell he hasn't been watching every second of Michkov because it's the first time he's seen that, and we've seen it 3 or 4 times at this point, watching every night.
Yeah, you're
The
talking
kid's
about
feisty. The kid's competitive. The kid doesn't put up with nonsense.
well, I think part of the equation with that has to do with that what teams are trying to do with him are trying to determine whether or not they can get get under his skin, which in some cases they do because he does
A little bit.
respond to it, but they're also trying to take advantage and be like let's see how far I can push this
Absolutely.
without taking a penalty
You're
to
punk testing the kid a little bit. He's a rookie. He's a superstar. He like every rookie gets punk tested a little bit, right? Sidney
for
Crosby
sure.
got punk tested by Darian Hatcher's stick. So this is how it's handled in the modern NHL. Um, you no longer get a Sherwood through your mouth. Um,
but
anyway,
I get your point about the hype and I get I get all that. Like and look, I sit there and I look at the end of the day and first of all, this was like because this was an easy we already talked about it, I think last week when we even teed this up as this was one of the games this week. You knew what the storyline was, right? Like of course, as much as we don't want to individualize the game completely, it was
Bedard
Michkov
Michkov.
Bedard. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I don't think I realized until I actually had to because I'm not going to sit like my job is not to watch every Chicago Blackhawks game. I don't
If
know
that
what
was your job, oof,
right. Well, but I don't know what the team is going through until they come through and I really have to start looking
do a
into
little bit of
what's
research
going
the
on.
day of type of thing.
Right, night before real like
Fair.
around the night before. Like once the game's over and there's time. I did not realize how bad of a slump Bedard was in until I went and really looked at the numbers.
Yep.
And it's like and of
He's
course
been struggling.
first period he hits one off the post. It looks like
Yeah.
he's going to possibly break that goal drought. Well, and by the way, one of the other things here's one thing I did know before starting really the research process. I had already seen earlier in the week that they had been trying him on the wing. That was something new. And that experiment ended really quickly once it was a 2-2 game. Because then he was back centering Taylor Hall and Teuvo Teravainen. And I'm like, uh-huh. Now we
That's
don't
where
want
you
to
belong.
now we don't know. Now we don't want to try him on the wing anymore. This was easy to do when they were what they won a game like pretty convincingly earlier in the week. Oh, what was it? 3-1 against Florida was the win that they had
Something like
earlier in the
that.
week.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, easy to keep him there when you're winning. Now it's a tie game. Oh no, we got to put him back at center.
By the way, Flyers legend Peter Mrazek had me nervous. He looked really good through the first 2 periods.
He looked
I
really
was I
good,
was concerned.
but they couldn't connect on anything
I
for
agree. Yeah.
most of the game. It was ugly. Like I'm going to tell you right now, it's a 2-0 game through 2 periods, and it's carrying through. Like we're getting past the like for 45 minutes of this game. I'm sitting there going, I got to pick 3 stars after this game, and I don't
I
even
have
feel
no idea what to do.
and I don't even feel good about like I guess I have to throw Kolosov into this because he's only given up 2 goals, but the second goal he gave up was terrible.
And by the way,
So I gotta give the guy a star.
Phantom's legend Pat Maroon.
But you get where I'm coming from with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I gotta give this guy probably one of the stars just for keeping them in a game with a goal that was as soft as any that you'll see.
And yeah, it was a tough one. It was just kind of if you didn't see the game, it was just kind of a situation in front of the net where Patrick
He,
Maroon didn't even really get a shot. He kind of just shoveled it
he
towards the net.
it's it's not so much like I can't call it a pass or just a
Right.
floater because it's directed toward the net. So it's meant to go on goal.
Just
But Kolosov is either completely cheating for a backdoor pass or just way out of position and out of sorts, which I think is more the accurate description because he's
yeah.
back. Well, because one, he backs himself way too far into the net. You're already susceptible to something like that by backing yourself so far into the net that one bad bounce, it's going to be by you. If you're aggressive there and you have the bad bounce, maybe you slow it up and somebody can get behind. Like, oh, if you're far out of your net and it hits the inside of your blocker and turns behind you, maybe somebody can react to that happening. Or maybe it just redirects in a way where there's enough ice behind you, it goes wide.
Or maybe that's just Patrick Maroon showing off the incredible skill that got him drafted in the 2007 sixth round, number 161 overall by the Philadelphia Flyers.
Maybe. Anyway,
Here's the thing: he was a 90-point scorer in juniors. Like even fourth line grinders were still the best player,
on their
growing
team.
up. Right. So, certainly not taking anything away from Patrick Maroon there, but it is nice. I mentioned earlier the fact that the Flyers did have to come back in this game. You're down 2-0.
Mhm.
Third period starts, and you can kind of tell that they're finally starting to get the wheels moving a little bit and play a little bit of offense.
This
Seven and
is
a half. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
no,
I was gonna say 7.5 minutes in, Sean Couturier gets the first goal, and we're off and running.
well, so number one about this was and I asked Couturier about this afterwards because it was kind of the same. This is just how you could feel it this way. If they got one as the third period went on, if they got one, it felt like they were going to score like four because it
Yeah.
was just the way like
Once the Peter Mrazek bubble bursts, it's gonna be a couple of goals because they were playing really well and generating a lot of really
right.
good
So
offense.
that was the first part of that equation. But I also I feel like this was a game where the two guys that got you back into the game tied really were high on the deservo meter of you should get something for the way you've played, generally speaking. And I say generally speaking because Couturier's out there for he's on the ice for both goals against that have been scored in the game. And both situations start with something coming from the offensive zone that was I turnover or at least a bad decision. Like they had an odd man rush going on the first one. They don't connect on a pass, and then that creates a transition rush the other way. On the second one, Tippett just winds it up the end boards, goes around, behind the back of the net, out the other side, and just directly gives up possession. And it turns into a situation where both, now it's in the neutral zone. Both defensemen go to the same side. Now that's going to spring Lucas Reichel for a breakaway. He does not score, but then 5 seconds later, Maroon gets the goal. And it's already a play where things are out of sorts a little bit because it started with a breakaway. As much as you don't like that part, Couturier stays with it, has a really strong game as the third period goes on, gets himself a goal. Noah Cates has played well for probably like 5 games in a row at this point and just doesn't have a goal to show for it. So finally he gets one.
He was getting a little snake bitten, so the fact that he finally got one, it was really nice for him.
And that
I hope
really
that turns him on for the season.
and ultimately when I picked 3 stars, like I said, now Michkov was my 1. I picked Couturier and Cates as 2 and 3 because like Couturier finished the game with 5 shots on goal. I kind of like that backs up some of the numbers a little bit, like or some of the play a little bit that you had possession, you were getting some shots, you were making yourself like in that area. And Cates had a solid game, all things considered, right? Like was one of the better forwards, regardless, just for defensive play. But if I was starting to try to lend myself to who am I going to pick without the numbers, without the offensive portion, Scott Lawton had some really good jump. He finished with 8 shots on goal in the game. Crazy. Like that's a crazy number for not doing anything. And I think I would have had to start to venture towards giving Rasmus Ristolainen one of them because
He
of
looked
like
really solid.
he had one of the better
Well,
games among defensemen.
And now, since you have mentioned defensemen, that was also one of the big stories going into Saturday's game was that the Flyers were getting a little bit of help back in their defensive core. Emil Andre and Cam York both returned to the lineup. Cam York came off IR, and they're back.
Yep.
Obviously, first game back, but what did you see out of them?
The same thing John Tortorella said after the game, struggles.
And when you take some time off like that, a little bit of that is to be expected.
Like,
Probably a good thing
and
for
I don't
both guys that you got to get back in against Chicago.
let me add some positive things to, like, yes, they struggled. I get it. There's rust involved with this.
Totally.
On the positive side, when you have those two in your lineup, your puck moving can be 10 times better.
It's
Like,
way better.
their mobility is what's going to help for sure. And that's the weird part, right? Like we knew about this just shy of the weekend coming. Like Friday-ish is when it was like, oh, there's a decent
Pretty
chance.
indicative that they
Well,
were coming.
there's a decent chance York is back and Andre's skating regularly. Drysdale's back in out of the non-contact jersey at practice. So he who knows? He might be a possibility for Monday when they play Vegas. Like, all of these guys that have been out are now coming close to being a possibility. Because let's face it, you're losing games, tight games, to Colorado and I guess you could say Carolina. I don't think it was really all that tight, despite being 1-1 through two periods. But you get my point.
It was a close game for 40,
Right,
whether it should have been or
but
not.
you're losing games that you are involved in.
Absolutely.
Having called up Helge Grans on an emergency call up,
Right, with
and having
three
to
of your
play him.
starting six defensemen out, right? Or well, I guess Andre didn't technically start the season, but you know what I mean.
No, but I think he's emerged into one of those guys that, like, is
I
now
was going to
part
say
of it.
I think John Tortorella's ideal six-man defensive lineup, if everyone is healthy, does include Emil Andre, and that's what I mean by that. And
It's
you had
starting to
three,
now, like,
and you had three of those guys out, right? And what did I talk about in terms of the back half of last season? You lost because you lost all your defensemen at the trade deadline, either via trade or via injury, and that's part of the reason you collapsed down the stretch that last year. So we just went through a week or two of that, and obviously, the injuries weren't too substantial. Hopefully, thankfully, but as those guys start to come back, if those tight games start going the Flyers' way, it's a whole different animal.
well, and here's I don't want to, like, as depleted as they were, because, like, yes, you're potentially getting three defensemen back within like a 2-game span here. I get it. Like, that is depleted if you're taking three guys out of your lineup. I'm not saying that. Grans is really like the only one who was like up and like thrown into a situation. The other guys who were filling the spots were Zamula and Johnson.
And that's what I mean is I'm not saying that you are replacing Cam York with Johnny Nobody, the fourth defenseman for the ECHL Reading Royals. But it's a downgrade. And in a close game in the NHL, going from, for example, a Cam York to an Eric Johnson might be the difference.
Sure.
And, like, again, no disrespect to Eric Johnson there. Just when we're talking about
No, he
this
knows it
much
though.
margin
He
of error,
knows.
right? And when we're talking about a league where there's this much margin of error, and if you're watching on our YouTube channel at YWT Podcast, I'm holding my fingers about 4 millimeters apart. There's that much separation in the NHL. So going from the Eric Johnsons to the Cam Yorks, like that's why Cam York's playing in the top four and Eric Johnson's your seventh defenseman. All things in a perfect way.
Maybe now more closer to 8, right?
Exactly,
Like,
right?
Emil
With
Andre
the
has,
emergence of Grans.
well, no, I mean, Andre.
Oh, with the emergence of Andre, okay.
Because if
Quite
Andre
frankly,
comes back in the lineup,
Grans has been good enough that if you were doing strictly a depth chart based on talent, and I know there's more to it than that, I think Johnson might be ninth.
the only reason
And
I'm not disagreeing with you. The only reason I'm going to say about, or what I'm going to say about Grans is because I've liked his games for the most part. He was a -2 against Carolina, but that was a rough third period. I get it. Like his debut, he was really good, and then I thought that I'm not going to sit there and say the same really good against Chicago, but he was solid.
he looked serviceable.
Didn't look out of place.
Here's what we say about defensemen. If you don't notice them, not a bad thing. Probably a good indicator that they're doing a decent job.
Well, and
And that's how I felt about Helge Grans so far.
my noticeable meter for something like that was more like every so often you'll see a subtle play and you're like, well, that was really good. Like you're not hurting the team with a play like that. So okay, like he makes some smart decisions. He's able to do some things. Here's what I worry about, and I'm not, and like as much as because okay, so York comes back, that was expected, and they actually announced that one way earlier in like or not way earlier, but early enough like on Saturday morning ahead of the game. It was known.
It was
He's
not
off.
a game time decision.
Well, because there was formalities to take place.
They had to take him off IR.
He's off IR, and somebody's got to move, and they sent Anthony Richard down. Now, I don't think
Yeah.
Anthony Richard played bad over any point of this, but
Quite
I do
frankly, he
think
probably didn't deserve the send down, if I'm being honest. Like how I just said that Eric Johnson's probably your best defenseman if you're listing on talent. Richard is not lower than 12th or 13th on your talent list among forwards.
here's the thing. He's I'm not like I think where you're coming from with that is that if I'm looking at the recent play of certain guys, he's played better than certain guys. That is valid. I think his game started to, I don't want to say slip, but like level off to what he is over the last handful of games because you just reach that point where it's like I feel like there's an element of when you call up a guy like that who is a quad A level type guy who can play at this level in bursts on occasion, there's a shelf life for, oh, he looks really good. And then
There's the fired out of a cannon effect. The first 3 or 4 games, he looks like he's been fired out of a cannon. He looks great, and then he settles into who he is.
But for 2 reasons. For personally, from the motivation side, I'm back in the NHL. I'm gonna have a great game because I'm just gonna play with extra because I've got
a chance to play in the show,
but also the element where the team that you're playing may not know a whole lot about the guy.
And I'm on a 2-way contract, so I'm making 10 times as much this week.
Well, that too, but what I'm getting at is that I wonder how long that shelf life lasts for Grans right now too. Like if I recall correctly, this is a guy that we weren't loving a whole lot of in preseason.
No, he looked fine, but he wasn't spectacular in any way.
I don't even know if fine was the right word. Like I think he had too many turnovers and too many mistakes. It was like, oh, this is clearly a guy who's not going to be here. We could have that debate even this year, even though it was way more likely he was going down to start the year this year. We could have that debate with Andre and at least look at certain games and be like, you're the first guy, probably. Like I know you're not making this team over the Zamulas and Johnsons of the world because the contract is what it is, but you are right there. If somebody isn't able to play, you might be getting a call.
And I agree. I think Grounds was looked at as a little bit more of like, well, this might probably a Phantom this year. Maybe he gets called up at some point, but like this is probably a bit more of a development year, get used to the system, whatever it is, rather than being called up and playing a bunch of NHL games.
Right. And listen, he'll go down soon enough, especially when Drysdale's ready to come back into the fold, which is not far away. But at least I want to say at least like, look, you held your own for a few games with him. Maybe you hopefully maximized all of that now while it was good. And he goes back down with a sense of like something to work on. You can play him big minutes again. And right. Because you got to realize something too. Like he was becoming another one of these guys. There's times where I say this about trades, that there are the forgotten pieces of things like that you almost sit there and you go, oh, I don't remember. Like here's kind of an example for you. When Claude Giroux got traded to Florida, everybody knows Claude Giroux went to Florida. And by now, everybody knows who the Flyers got back because he's turned into something that people pay attention to, and Tippett. Now, I think we're still at TBA with the draft pick portion of this, and kind of where it all goes. Actually, because they just used that pick, correct? Yes. No, they did just use it.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember how this worked, actually. Yeah. Wait, because they backed it up from 1 year to the next after a certain point, and yeah, they recently.
Florida traded their first round pick like 3 years in a row, so like a whole bunch of stuff is shifting around with conditions and this and that, and I am looking it up here.
Well, because you'll see where I'm going with this when I add in the other bits and pieces of it, because this started as so they've already used it.
This was the pick they traded.
Right. Yeah, it was 24-25, and obviously I don't think it didn't get you. Oh no, wait. So 25. I think that this is the one that this is the pick that they had that they pushed back to this year from trading it out of 32.
Right.
That's what it
So
was.
they
So it was a
were going to use it
25.
this year, but they traded out to next year.
Right.
Right.
So they still have it. It hasn't been. That's why I said. So it really is TBA. There we go. I knew there was
That
a
is
lot of
still
trades.
pending. Right.
My point is that in the midst of all of that, there were two other players in the trade. Do you even remember them being part of the trade?
I mean, I remembered that Helga Grans was one of them.
No, not in this trade. I'm saying the
Oh,
Claude Drew trade.
no.
That the Flyers also in making this deal sent Connor
Was that?
Bunnaman and Yerman Rubtsov to
Yeah. I do
Florida,
remember that now.
and then
Yep.
we've never heard much about them again. Kind of.
Yeah. Right.
The
Is
reason
they
I'm
still in
saying,
North America, frankly? Anyway.
but the reason I'm saying is because Grans became this piece in a 3-team trade that involved Ivan Provorov. And
Right.
now, not even say what was the focus. You can sit there and look at all of the moving parts of this trade, right? That got sent back in some capacity, right? Because this is the trade.
For the record, I do not care what assets the Flyers got back. They won that trade. Anyway.
Well, I'm sure you have other reasoning beyond that.
Locker room management.
Well, sure, but all right. So, like, let's do all of this, and I'll run down the combinations for you as best I can. Right. Provorov was traded to it was theoretically to the Kings. Eventually, he ended up on Columbus for it because that's how it was moved. But he was traded to the Kings at first, or passed through the Kings with Hayden Hodgson to get back Cal Peterson, Sean Walker. Grans was in that, and a second-round pick in last year's draft that they ultimately later moved also, I believe. They also traded Kevin Connaughton to Columbus and ended up with LA's first-round pick in 2023, which was used. That was the Oliver Bonk pick. And
that one's working out pretty well, it seems.
And they got Columbus's second-round pick, which was deferred to this year.
And I know Columbus is doing okay right now, but that will probably end up in the mid 30s.
Well,
maybe the late 30s.
Mid sounds a little bit more accurate right now. I mean, it's right there either way.
Well, 32. There's 32 picks in the first round, so the second round doesn't start till pick 33.
True. All right, so early 40s is what that's going to
be. Well, right, and probably late 30s.
Actually, ironically enough, and I didn't realize this, I just looked at the standings to see, because Columbus is only, by virtue of one less game played, if you will, they're tied. They're tied.
I know.
No, but what I'm laughing at is that the 3 picks that they have in the second round would all line up in a row right now.
Oh, that's really funny. They get to do a Boston.
Columbus, their own, and then Anaheim.
Okay. Show me Jake DeBrusk. Sorry. Whenever I hear 3 draft picks in a row, that's all I think of.
Yeah, by the second round, that's a little bit less, attractive, I guess. Fair. That was 3 first rounders in a row. Back to off of the Grans thing. Let's go back to Michkov.
Well, I was gonna say that overtime winner, man. So you draw a penalty 40 seconds into overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's because I'm watching the broadcast and they were setting up the narrative, or because of actually just watching the game.
Mm-hmm.
The game felt over the second that penalty got called. And quite frankly, that is something I don't think I have ever in my life said about a Philadelphia Flyers power play. But as we sit here, in my head, I went, oh, we're done. I don't know how long it's going to take.
Okay.
I don't know if it's even going to be necessarily during the power play, but they're not losing this game.
All right. Well, I wouldn't go that far for me, with overall scope of it. When they got the power play, though, immediately one of my first thoughts was, let's see how this looks at 4-on-3 now. Because, okay, power play. Now you're getting your shot. This is your shot in an overtime setting to go 4-on-3 and find a way to make something work.
Miles and miles of open ice.
Right. Yep. Well, because you know the scenario. You know, no questions asked. 3 players on the ice. Right. And I guess in fairness, you knew who was taking the face off. Whether he stayed on the ice or not was going to be another thing. Couturier did stay on the ice, but you knew who was taking the face off, and you knew the other three guys who are going to be involved in trying to figure this out. Who, by the way, are the two who got the assists on
Record
the
if they had
goal?
lost the face-off, I don't know if Couturier would have stayed on the ice. I think he only really stayed on because they got zone,
Probably,
right?
but but
But
it's funny to me how like yeah, and the other two players who touched the puck are exactly who you thought were going to be out there. It was you know Michkov and Sanheim kind of played catch for a little bit, got into the right positioning, and what I love is like and this is by the way like this is the end of the press box that I'm sitting down. I'm not looking at the far end of the ice. This is right in front of me, and the pass if I was lower would have looked like it was coming right at me.
to you, right?
Yes. So you see it unfold perfectly. And you just gotta like how Michkov in those situations, and it is an offensive minded thing, it is a power play thing, no question. But you gotta like how immediately he goes into this mode of I don't have the puck, I'm going to a spot where I want someone to
You
get it.
can get the no,
Well, because it happens kind of slowly. He starts the sequence by actually trying to pull out of the grouping that's toward the middle of the ice and wants to set himself up for the one timer, and then realizes
and then they've got to creep in.
very quickly realizes Sanheim's bringing it down to collapse the penalty kill formation. So I better move down and make myself open closer to the net. And as he does that, puts himself backdoor for that play so that all
And
Konechny has
then
to do is get it to him. And
and then
you just put a touch of sauce on that pass.
and then the most important thing, he buries it.
I
He
mean, it's a great play.
absolutely
It's a great play
buries
by
it.
Konechny, though, to start the whole
Oh,
to get
yeah,
the
absolutely. You mentioned your 3 stars of the game, and no disrespect to you, I think you picked the right players. Travis Konechny had 2 points and just wasn't even on the list.
well because by
Again, I
the
think it's correct.
because truthfully by the end of it, I could, like I said, I could have thrown Konechny in there. I could have thrown Lawton in there just for having a good motor that day. I could have thrown Ristolainen in there for having an assist, and nearly before overtime even happened, before Michkov was even there, it could have been Ristolainen in that grouping because he might have scored the winner. He nearly did. Like he had a
Oh, I know.
wraparound, like that most of the time probably goes in. Mrazek made a great save. It was just one of those situations, and I'm like, okay, like I have guys to pick. Like would you have argued with me if I would have turned around and said after all was said and done, I'm putting Kolosov in there because he got his first NHL win as a result?
I would not have nope, wouldn't have blamed you in the slightest.
Couldn't even do it because it was like one of the goals I didn't like that much, and by the end of it, there was
Too many other names.
three
Yeah.
guys I actually could put in there. But at least when they were on the comeback trail, it was like, all right, I guess I can put Kolosov in for making it a game if I really need to.
Well, if you didn't have enough room this week with only 3 games, only 9 stars handed out this week. The good news is this upcoming week you'll have 12 stars to hand out. The Flyers play 4 games this upcoming week. One more game on that 5-game homestand we've been talking about, and then you go to Nashville, and then you play your Black Friday back. You play a Black Friday back to back. Friday on against the Rangers at home, and then you go back on the road to St. Louis on the Saturday. A bit more of kind of a normal NHL week, right? Like most weeks don't have 3 home games. A little bit of travel, a back-to-back in there. You got Vegas, who's a good team. You got the Rangers, who's a good team. Nashville and St. Louis are both kind of struggling. It's going to be an interesting week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess let's start at the very top with this one because Vegas is a game you'd like to come out of this homestand with a winning record, and you'd like to beat one of these teams that like is better.
Beating a really good team would do wonders for this group.
Like, and by the way, I feel weird saying this because you had a great start to the homestand by beating Buffalo, who is third in the Atlantic right now. Like, I feel weird saying that in a way, like that.
Until the Bruins. Here come the Bruins.
But like, you started the homestand like that, then you lose to Colorado. Okay, I get why you lose to Colorado. You lose to Carolina, which is I get why you're doing it. Like, theoretically speaking, they're not technically by point total, but if we're like by points percentage, they're leading the Metro. Carolina is like that's a team that's got 3 fewer games played than the division leading Devils and are only 1 point back. They easily could be there very soon. And that is a team that just started to like that third period started to look like themselves. So you're playing a team that
I think the early reports of Carolina's demise were greatly exaggerated.
oh yeah, like that's a good team.
They're gonna be just fine. Yeah.
That's a really good team.
And also Jalen Chatfield. Oof.
Well, it's not normally the first name you come up with when you talk about that team, but I get you. He had a good
But
game that night.
he's the story, right? He's been good all year for them.
He's had a good year.
Um, by the
Look,
way,
talk about
Matvei Michkov, the overtime goal,
yes,
number 7 on the year.
yes, he's up to 7.
As we're about a quarter of the way through the season, if you're doing some projections with the 2 games scratched there, I mean, that's projection in the mid to upper 20s. Obviously, he's got to get there. Love to say it.
For goals, yes. I'm sorry, I was
Hey,
gonna say
for goals.
I'm
Yes, yes, yes. I'm
I'm
talking
sitting there
goals.
going projection for 20 something points when.
No, 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 no. I'm talking goals.
Like there's gonna come a point where, and I to be honest with you, I thought it was gonna be a little bit more so in this particular game than it turned out to be. But I was waiting for him that like I'm waiting for him to have another one of those games where it's like, here's 3 points. Or two, or at least a couple games in a row where it's 2. I kind of wonder if him playing in Nashville is going to open that up a little bit.
Maybe.
Like Vegas is
Um,
going to be a tough one.
I'm gonna hit you with a hot take here.
Okay.
The kid loves the big stage. Kid loves the spotlight.
Ooh, you
Black
got him
Friday.
scoring. Yeah, I was gonna say you got him scoring against the Rangers, don't you?
Bring an extra hat to the game.
Whoa, we're calling for that.
I listen, listen. Let's see it
I
that
will,
way.
I will, I will give you this much
It's
going
it's
into
it's
it.
a Russian goalie. You can
I
beat
will
him.
give you this much going into it, and look, I'm going to assume I'll check actually now to be accurate with it, but I'm
Come on,
going to
Matt.
assume that the
Come on,
Rangers,
Matvey. Don't you want to look good in front of
the
Artemi?
Rangers are well. Okay, see, you could
Don't you
take
want to
your
look good in front of Igor?
well, well, this is what I was getting at. Was I'm not sure who's going to be in goal because the Rangers also have a back-to-back Friday, Saturday,
Who are
but
they playing on Saturday?
Montreal.
Oh, we'll see the starter.
Give Quick. Yeah,
We'll
give
see
Quick that game.
Shesterkin.
Well, the only reason, you know what? The only reason I wasn't sure is because, and Shesterkin's obviously got great numbers against pretty much everybody. I'm not trying to deny that. Quick's got great numbers against the Flyers in his career.
Of course he does.
So it was one of those things. It wouldn't surprise me that like that's the one that and it's the road game and they're home the next day. So you might
That's
let the starter have
you
the
might get
home game.
Shesterkin get Saturday at home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering if that's the way that this goes. Who that now here's a fun one for you. Who the hell is in goal for the Flyers on Black Friday is a totally different animal.
Well, hopefully Sam Erson's ready to go by
I
then.
would not be surprised if that's the case. I kind of wonder if I'm still not sure we see him on Monday, to be honest. I'm kind of thinking Fedotov's going to get that game.
And then at that point, you probably don't risk it on the road in Nashville, right? Just give him a little bit of.
I don't know about that. I think that if
You think maybe they run him?
well, only because he went out and skated before, like, I mean, I guess he can do this. Like, the ice is available in your home arena leading up to, like, you to me usually I feel like what I would have heard differently like in that situation is that yes, I know it was a game day, yes, I know that is your home arena, you can do that. I feel like I would have heard, oh, he skated in Jersey before the game, like we knew he wasn't playing, he did skate this morning kind of thing, and he was just, I guess, so Erson was just there and went out and
Yeah.
skated on Saturday morning before the game ever happened.
Okay, that's encouraging, right? It's
So,
certainly not a
I
bad
mean,
thing.
that I guess theoretically that opens the door for Monday, but
Monday.
realistically, like if you're like, who knows? Maybe that is the game. Maybe that's the game that you circle and you say he returns against the Rangers.
We'll see. The good news is we will see. The Black Friday game is always a lot of fun. I can't wait to check that one out. And we will be back next week to talk about it. So we typically record on Sunday. The episode goes out Sunday night or Monday morning. We will be back next week. The plan is to kind of run for a while here. So um, happy holidays from us here at YWT. Thanksgiving is next week. So, my schedule's all messed up. Is Thanksgiving this week?
Yes, it is.
Thanksgiving is this
Oh,
week. Okay.
because we just talked about the Black
Yeah.
Friday game this week. So yeah,
Happy Thanksgiving, I guess. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us over there. Type in You Would Think. We are everywhere else on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it is just at Kevin Durso. And other than that, did you have anything else for us today, Kevin?
yeah. I mean, it's making me laugh that you brought up the thing about the week that is, because it's like they play 4 games this week, and one of the days is one of the days is a day where there's no games.
Yep. And
You
it's
know
a
what I mean?
holiday,
Like,
right?
well, like, of course, too. Like, I don't know, I don't know what your Thanksgiving plans are or whatever, but like,
Let's not get into it. We'll talk after the show.
no. What I'm saying is that
All
like
right.
it adds to a busy week for me as
Well,
well.
right.
Like
You're right.
we're
and even the players, you're playing, and I know most of them are Canadian or European and don't care, but you're playing 3 games in 4 days, and the 4th day is Thanksgiving.
Kind of, yeah, like it's well,
I
well,
mean,
right. You're talking about
literally,
Wednesday,
right.
Friday, Saturday for that. That's later in
That's
the week.
so I'm saying you're playing 3 games in 4 days, and the
Yeah, but
day off is a holiday.
this is the weird schedule thing again because I didn't
Yep.
realize that after they get through this week, we're gonna come on and do a show, and they won't have a game for like 4 days,
Right. It's
and
it's so strange.
then play another 3 and 4. I don't get it sometimes. I don't get where they come from with like where they come at you with this schedule, but
Alright, well, join us
it'll be a
next
fun
week
one.
as
Like it'll be a fun one because of 2 teams that like 2 really good teams, 2 teams that they, well, St. Louis, like we said at the top of the show, St. Louis
we'll
just
see
got a
where we are.
boost.
Yeah. Well, join us next week as we discuss the ups and downs and the rigmarole of the NHL schedule. Until then, happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you.